Shall we?
I can hear the intro music in my head.
Welcome to the AI Business Podcast. I'm Tien, the creative producer of Informa Tech. Join me is the man who is entirely in sync with his cat Gonzo. He is the global editor of AI Business, Max Smolaks.
Hello there.
So cold. And as always, the deputy editor of DCD, the man who refuses to install webcam. So we have no idea what he actually looks like, which makes him perfect to talk about facial recognition, Sebastian Moss.
Stay safe, everyone. Hello.
And on today's docket, we're going to talk about facial recognition. Can we stop it? Is it too late? And what is the end game for Clearview AI and companies alike? And who is self-driving car really for? Spoiler alert, it's not for you and me or the average consumers. Plus, we have a special guest to bring light and balance to the podcast. She's Katie King, and we discuss AI in education and her initiative to change the world for better. As Max smokes his cigarette. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you. It's one of the benefits of working from home. I've worked with a bunch of old school journalists, who were still alive and in editorial rooms and in 70s and 80s, and smoking in the office or like bottles of whiskey around, like right on your working table.
Old-fashioned 10:30 in the morning.
We are bringing it back.
Man from the past to talk about the future.
That's what we should call this podcast, actually.
I just love my comfort. Seb, any updates?
Paint us the picture what your room actually look like, because we can't see.
Talk about your food.
So here's a tip to everyone, because I've long been a prepper, so I feel very smug about this current problem. So I currently have 8 months worth of food, and I've got different regions. I've got Taiwanese food, I've got Russian food, I've got Polish food, I've got South American food, I've got all the foods required. So who knows with journalism, who knows what's going to happen career-wise? I am prepared. I can survive. I can eat. I'll outlive all of you. That's my plan. Every single one of you guys, every single one of the listeners, I'm going to outlive you all.
I know where Seb lives, so if the worst comes to worst.
Yeah, but you also know I have an axe, so worst comes to worst.
Okay, so let's talk about, the hot topic. I mean, you guys, everybody's been covering it. It really began last year about this company called Clearview AI, and a New York Times reported it, did a whole podcast on it from the Daily, and just show you how dangerous and crazy this founder who doesn't really care about any limitation. He's just like, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there. And he doesn't give you any specific answer. So now CNN just did a report on him too. And his name is Wong Tom Tet. And so now here we are talking about facial recognition, because now there's a piece on AI Business. All the major companies are pulling out. They all responded and said, yes, this facial recognition is very dangerous and we don't want surveillance. We want to limit and regulate surveillance tech. But in the meantime, they also said it's not our job to regulate it. The government needs to regulate it, and we'll stop either for a year or we're going to limit the usage. But is this all just a PR stunt?
It's a PR stunt with some important like there is victory here. Like, protests do work. We had some level of progress as a result of this. Obviously got the huge Black Lives Matter protest at the moment, and people are kind of seeing what can happen if police have lots of different tools. And we're mainly seeing what they have if you give them lots of military tools, right? And that's what we see in videos. What we don't see is what happens if you give them surveillance tools. So Amazon have said we're not working with the police for a year. Big caveat there, they said police, they didn't say law enforcement, so they probably still work with FBI, they probably still work with Homeland Security, they probably still work with the CIA. I mean, they have a cloud contract with the CIA.
Very importantly, ICE, right? Which is, again.
Yep. And they probably still work with the police departments they were already working with. And this is with the recognition, it's called recognition with a K. It's something that has been shown to mischaracterize and misidentify people, especially people of color. They refused to give their algorithm to National Institute of Standards and Technologies, who kind of looked at a bunch of other algorithms and showed more often than not they are biased. There's like deep racial bias in these things, often simply because they're trained on predominantly white data sets. Other times because if you have a structurally racist police force and you take the data from that and you give it to an AI, it will just reflect that structural racism. So you're not giving them a tool that fixes the problem, you're giving them a tool that compounds it. So IBM have said we're getting out this game entirely, which is good, but unfortunately came after they worked with Duterte in the Philippines to create a system that may or may not have been used for genocide. It came after they previously worked with South Africa way back when on systems that may or may not have been used for kind of perpetuating perpetuating the apartheid, and it comes after they may or may not have worked with the Nazis. So that's why it's a big deal that Amazon have said, hey, we're not going to do it for a year, but we also want legislation. Microsoft has said, we're not going to do it at all until we get legislation. Again, big caveats, because they make it seem like they're neutral arbiters. They have been lobbying extensively, very surreptitiously, with a lot of money, so to push for very lax legislation. So for them to now go, hey, we need some limits on this, it's kind of double-sided and two-faced.
When they say they stop, right? So IBM say they stop. Like, don't those people who they used to work with still have to solve for it? They just, they can still do whatever they want with it, or does that mean that they discontinue those tech once and for all?
Right, that's they've not said, which would make you think that they would continue, because if they were doing the better version, they'd be wanting to say it. I mean, they've said that they're stopping general purpose facial recognition, which is, again, there's always a little caveat. What does general purpose mean? The system they made for the Philippines, that was custom, so maybe they'd still make another system like that. The things such as the Philippines thing, such as the South Africa thing, such as recognition, such as Clearview, these all came out through great journalism. This didn't come out through them being honest. They are doing lots of things we don't know about. If you know about it, you feel free to get in touch with us, but it only comes out when people force them to say. You should trust those companies as little as possible, and you should trust the people that use their services as little as possible. Imagine, I mean, again, there's a lot of clarification about how accurate these tools are, and it's terrifying when they're inaccurate, because it means someone can get arrested when they've done nothing. But if they're super accurate, it's also terrifying.
I read a comment saying like, "Oh, hooray, I'm a minority," and then it's doing a really bad job recognizing, minority faces and Asian American and African Americans. And then the person was like, "Wait, hold on a second. That's not a good thing at all."
In a way, we should be almost grateful for Clearview. It's so great that there's this absolutely obviously evil company stepping in and just proving how evil it is every time it opens its mouth. We need a company like that as the poster child for evil surveillance. We need, like the congressman to read these stories about Clearview and how intrusive it is, and how basically you don't have a green, your information is already in there, and your face is somewhere in their database. That is scary, scary stuff.
Can I give you a more potentially scary and evil company?
Bring it.
Banjo. So this, again, quality investigative reporting by 10, where there's a facial recognition company working with a bunch of US police forces, just like Clearview, and their CEO was involved in a drive-by shooting of a synagogue.
I've heard about that one.
Sitting with, he was driving the KKK leader. He wasn't the one shooting, but that's really not great when you've got someone who did a hate crime involved in facial recognition technology being sold to police forces. He's resigned, but only as a result of that reporting.
And we come back to something we talked about last week, the sort of like conflict between the US and China, and the alleged Chinese surveillance of the Muslims, or like Uyghur population, right? Facial recognition is definitely an evil tech that's being used for evil purposes. And again, it's a widely known use case, so kind of like it colors like the whole debate, I think. The fact that one of the most famous artificial intelligence implementations in the world is used to control and track, like a minority population.
You kind of mentioned at the beginning, Tien, what can we do? From an individual perspective, you can talk to your legislator, you can contact them and say, hey, I care. From a consumer perspective, if it is a company that has a consumer-facing division like Amazon, like Microsoft, you can make a decision with how you spend your money. You can be very public about that. And then if you are out at protest and you are in favor of that protest, be careful with what photos you share online. If you take tons of photos of the crowd and put them on Twitter, they're going to be scanned. They're going to be used, and they will be recorded. So you are not helping your movement.
In a way, like we need to re-educate ourselves. We need a change in culture, because by default, I still, I don't check if my shit is going public, and increasingly that's a concern.
Well, I think the other concern is, we've talked about police departments using this or misusing this, and we talked about these specific companies misusing it. But these specific companies also work with other corporations, so you can have shops completely blacklist someone from being able to shop there. All these decisions that you probably can't even think about now. Your Uber rating, just making one up on the spot, your Uber rating maybe in the future could be changed and affected by just if they see you doing something, like urinating on the street, you can be policed at all points, not just by the police, but by corporations. And I think that's a very terrifying future.
Yeah, and that's before this data, like gets lost or stolen, and like the actual bad actors start using it.
To quote Lieutenant Daniels from The Wire, you ready for this? His wife says, "If you don't play, you can lose." And Lieutenant Daniels' response was, "I always thought is if you don't play, you can win." And to kind of tie it all up, what you're saying is, even if these companies stop, somebody's winning. You can't just say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna do the responsible thing, because those companies have shareholders and people can boycott the companies and they have a lot on on the line. But for a company like Clearview AI and was it Banjo,
Yeah.
those companies are doing whatever they want. And if I wonder if these companies, just by stopping, it's we can say it's a small victory, but somebody else is winning. Somebody else is, if just because you don't play doesn't mean that you're not going to lose. Everybody else is doing it.
We need effective legislation early on, as soon as possible, with real deterrent, not just fines, but actual prison sentences. And there also needs to be legislation on overseas sale. You should feel responsible for what companies in the US are doing outside the US. That there isn't something you can just go, oh, well, we fixed it here, which you haven't yet, but say you do. You shouldn't just be happy with that. There shouldn't be, no one should rest until this is something that no one has to deal with.
Okay, now hit us with the whammy.
Yeah, so here's something that is potentially scarier, and less talked about, is wide area motion imagery. Right? Sounds generic, sounds boring. A lot of what I'm going to say now came from a fantastic book, Eyes in the Sky, that I've been reading over the weekend, about the concept of an all-seeing eye. So have you guys seen Enemy of the State, the Will Smith movie?
Yes.
Everyone else saw it, saw the kind of zooming camera that came from space and tracked Will Smith around the city, and thought, this is terrifying. Unfortunately, a guy from the Department of Energy saw that and went, we should try and build that. That was his inspiration, and they ended up reaching out to the people that shot those scenes from Enemy of the State to work with the US government on how to build essentially huge, massive cameras that you fly over the city, over wherever the area of conflict or whatever you want to film, and it can just film this entire space, an entire city in one go. So one of the more recent ones DARPA are aware is a 40 gigapixel camera. And you're a camera guy, 40 gigapixels. Imagine that, just mind-boggling. 4 planes, and you can completely film a city from above, record it all. And this is where AI comes in, and this is where they're not quite there yet, as far as we know, is they can film all of that, but they can't categorize it all correctly yet. It's too much for a human to look at all these things. It might be useful if you know a scene of a crime, you can go there and you can click frame by frame and follow them. But the dream from their perspective is build an AI that can spot patterns. So one of the things in Baltimore, they were tracking criminals there, and they realized that after you do, say a shooting, you would double back on your car to make sure you're not being followed, and you do weird driving patterns to shake off any tail. So they got a system that could spot that and highlight it. Unfortunately, it's very basic at the moment, so if someone just happens to stop their car or happens to be like, oh, I forgot my phone, drives back home, the system alerts and it's like, this person probably did a shooting.
So you didn't see the crime, but you spotted somebody, just getting rid of the tracks.
Yeah, and then you can go back. You can go back because the idea is it's always recording. The idea is you get this permanent record of the sky, down to the level where they could see, car number plates. No one really cares about whammy. No one knows what whammy is. You might not see the plane, or you see a distant speck in the sky and you think, it's just a plane. Well, what is this? And they could be filming your entire city and recording every movement.
Do you think there's a group of people out there who think that, you know what, like what you were saying, like, I don't do drugs, I don't do crime, and if it makes our city safer? I think I saw that interview on one of the bloke on the London Bridge after the attack, and he was saying like, well, if it makes the street safer, who cares? If he can prevent the next terrorist attack, then isn't that a win for all? What do we say to them?
Well, I mean, 2 things. First off, they are doing some whammy stuff with an AI project called Project Omniscient in the UK, military defense. But so in London, they've been trialing facial recognition, police facial recognition. It's so far been very terrible. They keep arresting people who are not criminals that the system says is criminals. Also, in the reporting at the time, there's a guy, for example, he saw the sign saying there's facial recognition going on here, covered his face, and the police surrounded him like, why did you cover your face? And the whole idea, this was meant to be a voluntary trial. If you don't want to take part, don't walk down the street. He tried to do that. They saw that as suspicious. They saw the action of trying to not be facially recognized as suspicious, and they fined him. I mean, admittedly, he then told them, he swore at them, but I think, again, it's that what I was saying earlier, if you have to expect the worst. So if you don't do a crime now, things change.
To quote Benjamin Franklin, I'm sure everybody's heard of this quote: "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." Something I think about a lot when I'm considering like just a little bit of safety. I'm like, wouldn't that be great? Like, yeah, but before you know it.
But he was also an advocate of air baths, though, so I don't know. He would just wander around naked, so he probably wouldn't have been a fan of giant spy cameras. I think another point on the why you should care is post 9/11, you had the terror watch lists. They put on tons of people on no-fly lists that were incorrectly picked up by systems. People with the same name as a terrorist, people with the same name as relatives of the same name of a terrorist, and then they had no recourse. Even when they got the U.S. government to admit, "Oh, we accidentally put you on this no-fly list," they couldn't get off it. Now, imagine if these kind of things exist and you don't even know about them, and you're just being denied certain services, ability to do things, and you don't know why, and it's because of some error to do with your face looking like someone else's.
Are you talking about my credit rating for a second?
No, that's because of your spending habits.
Because you're student loan, you're massive student loan.
Yeah. Luckily, we're all burdened with student loan debts, but in the future we may not have to buy cars.
Fantastic, thank you, Seb. Yeah, well, this is just like it's literally a shower time epiphany. The idea is this: now we got self-driving cars wrong. I personally got self-driving cars work in a way that wrong, in a way that I thought they're for us, the consumer, right? They're for me personally, Max Smolaks. Like the universe obviously revolves around me.
Yes.
But just like 5G, I think many people get it wrong because primary applications will be industrial. And there's two stories about that. And just like one of them was about self-driving trucks and, this idea that they just you need one person at the head of a convoy and then you can transport, 6 times more goods. There's automated mining haulage. Trucks for open pit mining, and those things, I mean, yes, they're a scourge upon the earth, they're terrible, but we need them, and all those trucks do is go up and down the mountain, and there's no reason to have a person in there in the cab. So that's already happening right now, and they're saying that it's just that's going to be mining is going to be among the first industries to adopt self-driving. That also made me think about whether trucking is a noble and worthy occupation, because I think if we could get rid of some jobs, I think trucking should be one of them.
What do you say to the people who love waking up at 4 a.m. and fill their truck with goods and drive around the roads of America and serve this great country? What do you say to them, Max?
See, I don't know, and maybe it's not the right thing to say. And I just think I would rather die than be cooped up in this cabin for so many hours a day. I just think it's really inhumane. It's just personal opinion. If I got trucking badly wrong, please let us know in the comments.
We lost half of our listeners.
I mean, one of the difficulties with trucking, where I feel really bad, is they are at the forefront of surveillance to bring it back. They are all tracked, so they have to do this perfect middle ground of doing what their employer wants, which is maximizing work output over their own health, while keeping within guidelines that were designed to minimize the chance of them causing damage to other people's human health. So they're really trapped, and it's very difficult. But the other thing is, if all the trucking jobs go, it's not just them that go; it's all those pit stops.
Yeah,
all those little communities they go through where they stop for a meal, or they stop just to pee and then buy something. It's a huge, huge industry and a huge amount of jobs that we haven't come up with an answer for. We've come up with great answers for how to get rid of jobs. We haven't come up with any ideas of what to do.
because all this stuff is pretty much invisible, right? Because we don't think that like trucks have their own sort of like infrastructure network, because we think, it's driving on the road, that means it's kind of like an equal citizen, right? No, it might as well be on rails. It goes from point A to point B, sort of like stops in predefined stops. If you automate that, like, I don't think we're gonna lose much.
Yeah, beside the human jobs, we're not going to lose much.
Where does it stop? to quote every politician everywhere.
Who's gonna buy your services? Who's gonna buy your goods? Absolutely.
The other point with self-driving vehicles, and this kind of ties back to our surveillance thing, is picture a self-driving car, a self-driving truck. What is it? It's just a ton of cameras, LiDAR on wheels that is designed to create a 3D map of its environment. Now, you link that up with a ton of other self-driving cars, and that is a living, breathing 3D representation of a city, of an environment, of roads. And again, without legislation, who has control over that data? Who has control over who uses that? Whether federal enforcement agencies can access it.
And like, what does that do to people who already own the networks? Like organizations like Amazon, because that basically gives them such a competitive advantage that it's just like we simply won't be able to match, because Amazon used to rely on kind of like third party kind of like, well, delivery companies, right? And it doesn't seem to do much anymore. It's a very big employer of truck drivers.
Again, with Amazon, they've used data on third party sales to create their own products that they can then sell for cheaper than the third party product on their store, right? We know they use data in ways that we would assume is unethical, anti-competition. So if they also have all the data from self-driving vehicles, what then?
It's not a good situation, is it?
One of these days we've got to do a positive podcast.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that without you.
Thanks for listening. As always, if you found any of the stories interesting, check out the website. We usually have more information about them there.
So, Sebastian, where can people find you?
On the Worldwide Seb, at Twitter at Seb Moss, on Google, just Google me. I'm all over. There's pictures of me.
There's exactly 2 photos of you.
There's 2 photos of me. Unfortunately, I tried for a long time to keep photos of me off the internet. And then I started a new job, and the first thing they did was take a picture of me and put it on the internet, and then I gave up. But
does that picture actually look like you?
Oh no,
the 2 photos I found on there, they all look very different, so I don't know which one is you. I can tell they're the same person by my untrained non-artificial intelligent, but
time has been cruel to me, and the pandemic has been cruel to me, so I look much more haggard and hairy.
A lot older and a lot of white hair.
Sadder, wiser, more paranoid, as you may or may not be able to tell from this podcast.
Right, we actually cannot see your white hair because you're wearing a tinfoil hat.
Exactly, it's very useful as a Faraday cage.
Yeah, always help.
Thank you very much, Tien, Seb. Lovely to work with you guys. Bye.